Do you ever catch yourself sounding exactly like your mother during an argument, or notice your partner shutting down the same way their father did? These moments aren't coincidences. They're windows into how your past is shaping your present relationship. Hi, I'm Dr. Gloria Lee. For over 26 years now, I've been helping thousands of couples discover how the invisible patterns they inherited are creating very visible problems in their current relationship today. What you might not realize is that when you and your partner argue, there are actually 6 people in the room. You two, plus both sets of parents whose relationship blueprints you've unconsciously absorbed. Today, I'm going to share how intergenerational trauma affects your relationship and the 3 proven steps to break these cycles, not just for your relationship, but for the generations to come. First, let's understand what's really happening. When I talk about intergenerational trauma, I'm not necessarily talking about major traumatic events, though those certainly count. I'm talking about the everyday patterns, the unspoken rules, and the emotional climate of your childhood home that shaped how you understand relationships. In my work with couples, I've identified 4 primary ways intergenerational patterns show up in relationships. The first is emotional language barriers. In many families, certain emotions were acceptable while others were forbidden. Maybe in your home, anger was freely expressed, but sadness or hurt were seen as weaknesses. Or perhaps your family valued stoicism above all else, treating any emotional expression as inappropriate. One couple I work with, let's call them James and Layla, struggled because James grew up in a family where love was shown through actions, not words. His parents never said, "I love you," but they worked hard and provided. Meanwhile, Layla's family was verbally affectionate, but often unreliable in their actions. When James didn't express his feelings verbally, Layla interpreted it as a lack of love, despite all he did to show his commitment. The second pattern is role repetition. We often subconsciously step into the same roles we saw modeled, or their exact opposites. So if you watch one parent become the family's emotional caretaker while the other was distant, you might find yourself playing out that same dynamic, regardless of which role you adopt. The third pattern is conflict templates. How was conflict handled in your family? Was it explosive and chaotic, silent and simmering? These early experiences created your template for how disagreements work. When your partner's conflict template differs from yours, confusion and hurt feelings naturally follow. Finally, there's boundary inheritance. Many families have unhealthy boundary patterns, either too rigid or too porous. Perhaps personal privacy wasn't respected, or maybe emotional walls were so high that true intimacy was impossible. These boundary patterns become your default until you consciously change them. Now, here's why this matters so deeply. When these patterns go unrecognized, couples get stuck in this repetitive cycle where you're essentially trying to resolve childhood wounds through your current relationship. This is why couples can fight about the same issues for years without resolution. You're not actually fighting about the dishes in the sink. You're fighting about what the dishes represent based on your family history. It could mean that your partner isn't trustworthy because they don't follow through with their commitments, or they're not there for you when you need them the most. The most important thing to understand is that when these patterns get activated, you shift from your wise adult self into what I call your adaptive child, the part of you that developed strategies to survive your childhood environment. This adaptive child can be defensive, people-pleasing, controlling, or avoidant. So you may defend yourself when your partner confronts you about being unreliable, or attack their character to deflect responsibility. The good news is that with awareness and practice, you can break these cycles. Here are 3 steps I developed to help couples heal intergenerational trauma. Step 1, recognize your family patterns. The first step is to become aware of the patterns you've inherited. This isn't about blaming your parents. They too were shaped by their upbringing. It's about being honest about how your family history influences your current relationship. Try this exercise. Draw your family tree going back 2 generations. For each relationship, write down what you observed or heard about how they express or didn't express love, handle conflict, set boundaries, distributed power, then identify which patterns you see showing up in your current relationship. This awareness alone can be transformative. One couple I've worked with, let's call them Michael and Sophia, realized they both came from families where criticism was the primary form of communication. Once they recognized this pattern, they understood why even gentle feedback felt like an attack to both of them. Step 2. Reparent your adaptive child. When you find yourself becoming reactive in your relationship, whether that's becoming defensive, withdrawing, people-pleasing, or attacking, it's a sign your adaptive child has taken over. In these moments, practice what I call internal reparenting. Pause and say to yourself, this feels familiar. My adaptive child is trying to protect me right now, but I'm safe to respond differently. Then take 3 deep breaths to activate your parasympathetic nervous system and bring your wise adult back online. From this calmer state, you can choose a new response rather than repeating old patterns. Ask yourself, what would a loving, secure adult do in this situation? Step 3, create a relationship constitution. The final step is to consciously design your relationship based on what you both actually need and want, not what you inherited. Sit down together where you're calm and create a relationship constitution that answers these questions. How do we want to express love and appreciation? How will we handle disagreements? What boundaries do we need when we fight? How will we make decisions together? This becomes your shared vision that you can return to when old patterns try to reassert themselves. For example, your constitution can state, we will take a 20-minute break when arguments get heated, and we will express appreciation for each other daily. These simple agreements help create new patterns that better serve your relationship. What makes this 3-step approach so effective is that it addresses the root causes of relationship struggles, not just their symptoms. It works with your nervous system rather than against it. And it gives couples like you practical tools for real-world situations. I won't pretend this work is easy. Breaking intergenerational patterns requires courage and persistence. You're essentially rewiring neural pathways that were formed throughout your childhood. Here's what I can promise you. With practice, these new patterns will start feeling natural. The couples I work with report not just improvements in their relationship, but healing in other areas of their lives as well. And perhaps most powerfully, they're creating new, healthier patterns for their children to inherit, breaking chains of intergenerational trauma that may have persisted for generations. If you found this helpful, hit subscribe and the notification bell. Leave a comment below sharing which patterns you recognize in your relationship. I read every comment and would love to hear your experiences. Remember, the patterns that created pain in your relationship weren't created by you, but the healing can be. You have the power to transform not just your relationship, but the legacy you pass down to future generations.